then our most precious commodity is our attention. It's where we place it. It's how we place it. It's the time that we take to be intentional about the direction we would like to take that attention, and to be willing to challenge even what we think we know in order. Me too. Michael, what are your thoughts on what Bob and I shared?
Ooh, good question.
Well, I absolutely love it. You know, I mean, this is, you know, my whole interest in doing this is to try and explain, you know, what you guys are working on in a way that, you know, the average, you know, one of the average people within our community understands, you know, the value of what this could be for them. Because, you know, I think there's a lot of people, and, you know, especially being, you know, a lot of ANCAPs, capitalists, and people that are interested in business that have read things like Napoleon Hill or Anthony Robbins. They've, you know, watched a bunch of their stuff. Well, this is all still the same basis. They're still talking about the very same things, you know, of how to alter your mind to believe, to create the beliefs, because we do learn our beliefs. You know, and our beliefs are a function of, you know, the information that we're given. It's unfortunate that we're kind of focused, you know, our focus is steered towards the information that you know, that serves the purposes of the authorities versus our own purposes. And that's kind of the thing that I want to you know, get across, is that with this community of people, we have access to a great deal more information, knowledge, logic that can help people change. And, you know, you guys are just a perfect example of people within the community that's got, you know, a tremendous amount of knowledge and wisdom and ability that we could be utilizing, you know, to change the community and change the capabilities of the community in such, you know, much greater ways.
Then,
But you know,
if it's
you
okay,
guys,
Michael, if it's okay if I speak to that, then our most precious commodity is our attention. It's where we place it. It's how we place it. It's the time that we take to be intentional about the direction we would like to take that attention, and to be willing to challenge even what we think we know in order to open ourselves up to even a small learning that might add to that, even in a small capacity. And for me, the biggest place I want everyone that's listening right now to start is with your language. It's within language. So there is a difference between saying to somebody, I am joyous, versus I am happy. They sound like synonyms, but when somebody uses even these synonyms, you can, if you take the time, really sense the difference in how you connect or relate to those two different words. Because these words are being used by the people in power on purpose and by design in order to elicit a very specific affect in your experience, in order to guide your attention to a specific outcome. Well, if you're willing to question what the words mean to you that they're using, then you open yourself up to a deeper form of education. Not just about that one individual and what they're saying, but to how you relate to these words and what your connection is to them. And then you actually tap into the power of your own minds. You get to tap into this. And so if there's anything I learned from watching those videos that you sent over to me, it is that most people are handing this power of their attention away in order to achieve, from my experience, comfort. I'd rather come home from work and sit down and turn on a TV and let someone else tell me what I'm supposed to think or believe or how or where to place my attention than to take a responsibility or ownership for guiding it with purpose. And that for me is what I hope conversations like these and the many more I know are happening in the anarchy community around the world will inspire in others. And if there's one more thing I can hopefully impart on anyone listening right now, and that is be a questioner of experience. Be curious. Practice childlike wonderment. And stay in awe of what's available, because then you won't. I'm going to use a sort of a trendy term, but you won't start to believe in your own hype and start to think that the thoughts you're having even right now can't be built upon. And from that mindset, you'll continue to grow and evolve. You're even within your own sense of self and your own belief systems or structures or whatever map you put on it. As long as you're willing to recognize the map is just a map, then you can continue to add to that until you perceive infinite choice. And that right there for me is the neurological, linguistic programming foundation of freedom and sovereignty, which is make sure that you don't get stuck believing that one word only has one way it can be represented in experience. So that's my sort of thought based on what you shared, Michael. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to remind people that the map is not the territory, that we actually have no direct connection with the territory. We're only aware of the map. And we can control and change the map. We can edit the map. We can update the map. We can make different kinds of observations that lead to changes in the map. And it's still just a map, as you pointed out. Quite right. Just a map. I think that one of the things that we can do that is most helpful, certainly has been in my life, is just constantly revamping my map. And of course, you've got to be open to new information to do that. Otherwise, you just keep going in circles. And I don't mean feedback loops.
Michael, the second question you asked, you had mentioned to me, and I don't know if you want to bring that up now, but you had talked about Shad Helmstetter's book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And you talked about the 3 points. Did you want to ask about those? Because I think that we're kind of like touching on the edges of it actually right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You guys are ahead of me when it comes to my questions. You answer them before I get a chance to ask them. But yeah, in Shad's book, he's talking about diagnosing a lot of the business, and self-help books, and effectively pointing out what it is that they're missing. And he points out 3 different things. One is understanding that the temporary nature of solutions. The second is the knowledge of the processes of the brain and how it functions. And the third is the knowledge of a method to reprogram one's mind, to actually gain the beneficial results that you're after. And, in both cases, and I think this is what I think Bob was going to be leading to, is in addition to what you've talked about, what Bob is recommending in regard to the octalogs and stuff is building trusting relationships with people in where you can have discussions about what your beliefs are and question your beliefs with other people that have, the honest respect to tell you exactly how it is that they feel and what their perspective is when it comes to things like, what does this word mean, or what is that guy saying, or does that really make sense? And we can only have an expertise in really very few areas when we're talking millions of different things that are out there that are possible. And so having trusted people that we can turn to ask questions about a different perspective gives us a more rounded approach and rounded kind of level of evidence that we can then reformulate what our map is. But I'll let Bob go from there.
Wow, I'm not quite sure what to say in response to that. I do believe that we have enormous flexibility. Those of us who are trustworthy get to form lasting relationships. If you're not trustworthy, don't expect to have lasting relationships. What does it mean to be trustworthy? Well, I had someone recently ask me, if I get together with this gal, what kind of agreements should we make if we want to have a real relationship? And I recommend 3 promises. Number 1, I will never touch you in anger. That's really important. You'd be amazed how many people don't do that. Number 2, I will always tell you the truth. I'm never going to lie to you. And number 3, I will be forthcoming. In other words, if there's anything going on with me that could affect you, I'm going to tell you my thoughts, my feelings about and toward you. You agree to give each other that kind of feedback?
Hey, Bob, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you consider it lying to someone if that individual's lying to themselves?
I think if we lie to ourselves, we can't be honest with one another. We have to be honest with ourselves first. If I don't know who I am or how I got to be who I am, how can I honestly represent myself in relation to you?
So then I ask, just because this is a great topic, so then I ask, how does one become aware of one lying to oneself?
In order to do that, at least I'm giving you my version on this. You may have a different take, but
of course.
My version is this. We only have one really good mechanism for lying to ourselves. Think about the question, if I were going to lie to myself, particularly something about me, and believe the lie, how would I go about it? How would I go about intentionally lying to myself and then believing the lie? I only know one way to do it, and that is by hallucinating.
And make it appear as truth. Yeah.
And there is a particular form of hallucinating that I think is the most fundamental, and that is amnesia, where I blot out the memory of how I got to be who I am, or some portion thereof, and I create a fantasy to take its place. The fantasy is a lie, but it's only possible because I've got amnesia for the reality. That mechanism is controlled by the subconscious that, as far as I can tell, has a complete record of all my experience. I have only to ask for access to find out what I want to learn about that unknown past of mine. And so when I'm working with a client, one of my objectives is to help them to uncover those amnesias and recognize, oh my gosh, yes, when I was 6 months old, I had this terrible experience and it shaped my life. I can relate. I can tell you how my circumcision at the age of 8 days shaped a major part of my life. Profound effects it had. Well, when you remember these things, you take charge. You become consciously in charge of so many things that were previously just automatic, paradigmatic, automatic stuff. And this frees us. This sets us free from the deeper chains, so to speak, that are used to manipulate us by the so-called authorities. So when it comes to our place in the world and how we relate to authority, when I know myself, I understand authority. I get it. I understand where they're coming from. And it's awesome and terrifying at times, because the people who make themselves our authorities are literally, abso-fucking-lutely without conscience. They don't care how many people they kill or how painful it is for those people they're killing. They just don't frigging care. It's hard to imagine that when you're lying to yourself about your early life. That someone could do something to you when you're 8 days old that feels like your whole body's on fire, and then kiss it off like it's trivial. Oh, I'm going to pretend that never happened. I'm going to pretend that I wasn't affected by it. But it was a life-threatening, torturous experience. And if you don't remember it, how are you going to relate to these authorities that don't mind torturing you? Get it clear. Know yourself. Remember who you really are. And so many crazinesses go away. It really comes down to that, as far as I can see. And Michael, I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yeah, in fact, it got me another question. Let me ask this last question, and then we'll wrap it up, because we're closing in on the end time. We did start a little bit late, so we might go a little longer, but that depends on if you guys are available. But one of the things you mentioned was the idea that we're creating amnesia, where we don't really recognize what it is that happened to us in our past. But isn't it also true that, like, when we get angry at others, we're really projecting our own self on that other person, and essentially being angry at what it is that it is about us that we can't deal with? Isn't that really kind of a indicator of the blind spot that we have? So, like, when we're triggered, is that really kind of a reflection of our own blind spots?
Well, that's
and thereby, go ahead.
I would say yes. I would say yes. When we are little kids, when we're tiny kids, stresses in our lives create our character. But as adults, stresses reveal our character. And so, yes, I get really upset with people who show me behavior that I don't like in myself. I learned not to like it in myself when I learned that behavior from someone else. So there's a transference thing going on where I introject, for example, a punitive, critical parent, and I criticize myself. And then I get a little bit of criticism from someone else, and that part of me just goes crazy. Oh my gosh, here's someone else doing what I do to myself, and I don't like seeing it. I don't like remembering it. It threatens to bring back the forbidden memories. And so we defend against it. There are ways of getting past that. Neuro-linguistics is one of those ways. Not the only way, but a good way. Very powerful set of tools.
I have a completely different take on this.
Oh, cool.
If that's okay for me to talk about. And that is
no, you're not allowed to disagree.
Right? No. Okay, that is this. For me, anger is about the defense of one's boundaries. What's okay and what's not okay as you define your sense of self. But I think we're talking about two different kinds of anger. Okay? If you're a baby and you've got a bottle and you're hungry and you need that food that's in that bottle to survive, and someone takes the bottle from you, they've crossed a boundary. Okay? And so anger makes sense because you need that nourishment to live. But as soon as you give the baby the bottle, whoop, anger gone. And it's because the baby got the need met. So it's attained that need. But I think the anger we're talking about is a prolonged anger, which is like, it's like the person crossed a boundary. Now they're not crossing a boundary, but I'm still angry. Now, are you actually still angry at them? Or did they trigger something in you of a boundary that you're crossing in yourself? And you don't want to cross that boundary anymore in yourself, and they're just a representation of it. They're just to coin Bob's term, they're a feedback loop. They're a reflection or a representation of that boundary crossing within yourself. Now, agreed wholeheartedly with Bob if we're talking about the latter. But if we're talking about the former, no, I don't. It is not okay for you to place your hands on me. You have crossed my physical boundary, and I believe a certain amount of anger is warranted at that point in order for you to reset your boundary in a healthy way. Get your hands off me. You touch me again like that, and you and I are going to have an issue because I have not crossed your physical boundary or your physical space. You have crossed mine. That is not okay with me. Okay, as a result of that, there needs to be a negotiation of what are our boundaries together. So there can be an open communication about that. But if that person acts as a representation of where I am violating my own boundaries in myself, I'm not likely going to deal with that person in a healthy way because this no longer has to do with them. I'm not attacking them. I'm attacking myself through them. They're not even real anymore. It's really me against me, for lack of a better term. So I think we're talking about two different kinds of anger when it comes to boundaries, self and others. And how do we, in this shared reality or in this shared space, navigate the differences we have in values, virtues, beliefs, identity, the logical levels. I'm just bringing this back to Dilts again. Back to the logical levels again in order for us to come to a better shared understanding.
What I hear you calling attention to, and I think it's right on, is the intersection between the interpersonal dynamics as we know them and the ethics. You're basically introducing ethics into the mix, and it is essential. I thought that ethics was a trivial subject until 1984 when I met John David Garcia. And I quickly learned from him that it's the most important subject one can possibly learn. It is key. If we're ever to have peace between two people, let alone peace on earth or peace over a big region, if we're going to live at peace with each other, we have to have some common understanding of the ethics. And that, I think, would make a really good topic of a future conversation, because it's a big, big topic, and we can spend
huge topic.
Absolutely, huge topic. I'd love to spend another session like this just on that one topic. But I appreciate your bringing up the ethics in that way. You pointed to the intersection of communication and ethics. And there's a lot to be said about that.
Agreed wholeheartedly. Michael, there's one last thing, if you're okay with me sort of waxing philosophy for just a couple more minutes. Bob talked about some of the really important ways that he believes that people can be paying attention to themselves in order not to lie to themselves. Okay? And by looking at memories and being honest with oneself about what actually occurred in your own life so that you don't negatively hallucinate or disappear those memories from your life. I want to bring just one more little tool or component that does tap into Dilts' logical levels, which is what's happening right now as a feedback loop. Like, because I see people who are experiencing things happening to them in their lives that could be reflections that would show them they are lying to themselves, because you can't argue what's happening around you in your environment. So it's you know, somebody says they're a pacifist and that they have nothing but peaceful ideologies, and yet they are in discord or disagreement with everybody in their lives. Well, that's an interesting intersection there. How does pacifist intersect complete discord, conflict, and chaos within all of your relationships? So it's almost like we disappear or ignore, I'm bringing us back to Bob, the same mechanism, amnesia or dissociation or we call it a negative hallucination. Okay, you're disappearing this evidence that could show you what you're saying about yourself and what's actually happening around you are not in alignment. And as a result of that, you could be going, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on within me that may be contributing to the discord, dissociation, misalignment, incongruence that's happening around me. And now you get to step out of yourself and look back at yourself from the evidence from that point of view. And then you get a chance to see the lies that you may be telling yourself in this moment. So Bob's technique is 100%. I believe that going back to that point in your childhood and being able to be truthful with yourself from that moment forward would lead to this. But you don't have to always start in the past. Why not start right now and then work your way back? You can go either direction, or you can start someplace in the middle and work your way out. You know, that's the beauty of consciousness. So just as another tool for everyone that's listening, you can also start with looking at your life and saying, how is what I'm believing about myself and believing about the world, how is that relating to the actions that are actually occurring? And this is, I think, the fourth missing ingredient, Michael, from Hedstetter's Shad's work, or Shad Helmstetter's book. He talked about understanding and knowledge. There's a fourth component. How about action? What's the execution? Yeah, you can be aware of something. Yeah, you can understand it and have knowledge of it and do nothing with it.
Right.
Okay, so for me, that fourth missing ingredient is actionable steps that can be taken, and the motivation that you need to tap into within you to actually do something with it.
I'm reminded of a comment that I got from Ilana Rubenfeld back in 1973. She was a student of Fritz Perls, and I was learning Gestalt therapy from her. And one of the comments she made stuck with me that applies to what you're saying, and that is that in the course of personal growth, understanding is the booby prize. We can get all kinds of understanding, all kinds of knowledge, but if you don't change your action in the world, so what? It's the booby prize. It's crumbs off the table. It's not very valuable. It's sometimes a necessary step towards changing your action. Not always. One of the things I've done a lot of experimenting with neuro-linguistically has to do with, there are people who are very, very resistant to recalling their early experience. that amnesia is really tough to break. And what I found is the subconscious is willing to negotiate changes predicated upon how would you change behavior if the conscious mind had all those memories? What would be the right response? So in other words, I turn the subconscious, or I help the person to turn their own subconscious into the understanding part. So the understanding doesn't even have to be conscious. The memories don't have to come back, but the changes take place anyway. It's a more subtle form of neuro-linguistics than most people do, I think. And I have found that there are people with whom that is the best way to go, where basically if you try to dredge up the memories, the resistance just gets built up higher and higher. So I go the other way. With such a person, I encourage the amnesia while forming a collaboration with the subconscious and its ultimate purposes. I'm sure you've done this too, Jonny, because I can tell from the way you talk about these things. For example, it's very obvious you really use words carefully. You're encouraging other people, listen to the words, understand the meanings. I can see that you do this, and I appreciate it. I've done it most of my adult life too. And it's little things like that that have led me to encourage people, for example, get the word try out of your vocabulary. Every time you tell yourself you're trying, you're lying. And lives change beneficially when they do that. Can and can't. When I graduated from John Grinder's 6-month course, he gave us a present of a Tony Robbins firewalk. It took the lid off of my idea of what I can and can't do, which is really the only reason I bothered to do it. But I walked barefoot across about a 10-foot, 12-foot patch of red-hot glowing coals without getting burned. There is no scientifically valid explanation for that phenomenon. There are a lot of hypotheticals about it. Nobody really knows how the human body does that. And yet 60 of us did it in that group. There were 60 people in the group, and we walked across those coals, proving that even at best, we don't know what we can or can't do. So I encourage people to get the word can't out of their vocabulary. It's a dangerous word. In a very different sense than most people talk about the dangerousness of words, because most words are absolutely harmless unless you take them seriously. It's the taking them seriously that gives them power. Okay, I feel finished with this subject matter for now. How about you guys?
Yeah, well, I think we've taken a pretty nice round trip from the beginning to the end, and kind of encompassed this all very nicely. I'm really grateful, and the things that you guys mentioned, and certainly the things that we've gotten from these 2 interviews, I really appreciate the differences of opinions and the different perspectives that both of you have put forth, and certainly in Sterling's case, the third version of a different perspective that I think gives people a much broader point of view than what this is. There's much more to it, but some of the things that you mentioned, a lot of these things are things that, like you said, can be understood, but it's that action, it's the ability to hold yourself accountable, or have somebody that can hold you accountable to actually make the changes. Sometimes it's our kind of our old programming, our old habits that keep us from moving forward. And that's one of the things that you guys bring to the table, is the ability to hold people accountable and give them the techniques that, you know, like if it doesn't work on plan A, well, there's always plan B. And then if plan B doesn't work, there's plan C. And you guys have gotten that background. Both of you have helped me tremendously, so I can certainly speak to your skills and abilities. Just finally, in regard to our next episodes, we talked about, kind of making this a little bit of a series. I don't know how long this will last, but what I would like to offer is, for each one of you to essentially have your own episode where we talk about the topic that is most burning in your mind in regard to what people would find really helpful. And so I'll let you guys comment on that, and we'll leave the audience there for the next go round.
I've been told since I was a little kid that I'm a ham. I like to get in front of an audience. I like to stand up and talk. Sometimes I'm a little obnoxious about it. I know, yeah. My wife once told me I talk too much. She wanted me to join a 12-step program. We found one for people who talk too much. It's called On and On and On. Anyway, I really feel finished with covering this topic for now. I would like very much to go on to some other topics in future discussions. So I'm sure we'll do that.
And Michael, I would love to talk about the psychology of fear and insecurity, and what that does to destroy our confidence, which keeps us from challenging the system, that keeps us from challenging people's ideologies, including our own, in order for us to learn and grow and ultimately get back to those curious beings that constantly look forward to the beauty that life has to offer us.
Amen.
Yeah, that sounds great. So we'll kind of steer towards that. So the next episode will probably be something along that. And hopefully we'll have Sterling back for round 3. But with that said, I really greatly appreciate both your guys' time and attention. Thank you for taking the time out. Really greatly appreciate it. And